Now, I don't care where you all are listening from, whether you're in the dorms and you're 18 or 19 years old, or whether you're a longtime listener to this program, you're in your 50s or your 60s, you've heard that song many, many times. You've heard it on the radio, you've played it yourself, Killing Me Softly, sung by Roberta Flack. But of course the song was not written by Roberta Flack. It was co-written by the guest we have in the neighborhood today. His name is Charles Fox. He wrote that song. He also wrote I Got a Name, made famous by Jim Croce, and a bunch of TV themes, including a couple that we played a couple of minutes ago, the Happy Days theme and the theme from The Love Boat. We'll be playing a couple of more, but first I want to talk to Charles Fox. And hey, Charles, how are you this fine morning and new year?
I'm great, Dave. Nice to speak to you.
Nice to talk to you too. And you're flying somewhere today, aren't you? You're getting on a plane in an hour or two.
Yeah, we're just going down to San Diego to visit my grandkids and my daughter.
Oh, mazel.
It was great. We were in New York though a few days ago, so we flew back, and I was just going to go visit my grandkids and my daughter.
Oh, lovely. Now, let's take it from the usual beginning of these things when you talk to songwriters and just say, okay, when did you realize you had the talent and not only could play an instrument but had a creative bent to write music rather than just play other people's music?
I was quite young when I started composing music. It was never a question, really honestly, Dave, of recognizing any talent within me. I recognized the need, and I guess I was about 15 or 16 years old when I started dabbling with writing music. And actually, I think when I was 15 years old, I was in a studio with my own band recording my first tune. Mm-hmm. I had a Latin band, and I got into Latin music very early. And actually, my first songs were in Spanish, believe it or not, because I don't speak Spanish. But I had a good feel for the music, and eventually ended up playing for some of the bands like Red Benetto and Tito Puente, and I wrote some music and arranged music for them. But when I was in high school, I studied composition. At the High School of Music and Art in New York is a great school of the arts.
That's the famed school, right?
Well, actually not. The famed school is performing arts. But coincidentally, the performing arts and music and art merged about 25 years ago. Oh. And now they are one of the same. It's LaGuardia School of the Arts. And I'm still very involved with the school. I go back and I speak to the students and all that. So I had a composition teacher who kind of, really turned me on to what was inside composition. And then I continued studying with him after high school, about a year while I was playing in bands. And a year following that, I went to Paris and I studied with Nadia Boulanger.
Now, I read that on the wiki site and on your bio. What was so special? I've heard her name before, even though I'm not that kind of a musician. What was so special about her? What did she teach you, Nadia Boulanger?
She was an extraordinary teacher. She was an extraordinary woman. She had a total understanding of music and what makes music work. She was Eric Copeland's teacher 40 years before me.
Oh my God.
And generations of composers went to Paris from around the world to study with her. I mean, the list of composers like Philip Glass.
Well, what marked her as, in other words, how was she different than, say, another accomplished and pretty good music teacher? What was her special thing?
She had extraordinary understanding of music, and she could take each student and understand how their music needed to work and how to make it help them make it better. I used to see her about 3 or 4 times a week for lessons. I was there for 2 years with her in Paris.
Oh, wow.
I went for the summer to Fontainebleau, France, and there was a conservatory that she was the head of, the director of, and she asked me to stay on in Paris and study for the winter. I ended up being with her for 2 years. I saw her at least 3 or 4 times a week, and for private lesson and composition analysis, and a grueling keyboard harmony class. We do impossible things with the keyboards. But she had, first of all, extraordinary love for music. It came out of every pore of her body. It came out of her eyes, and it came out of her look, and it reached you. And if you did something really good, if you wrote something really beautiful, she would play it. She'd look at it on the paper, and then she'd look away from the paper and just play it. And she would look and say, "This was beautiful. This was where you need to work on this, and to what extent." And it was really capturing the really essence of music. And she took me back to the beginning of harmony So I did a lot of other composition with formal strict harmony with our counterpoint. I was really learning music from the ground up. I was with her for 2 years. I have to tell you, many, many years later, nearly the age that she was when I first studied with her.
Yeah. If you, by the way, if you could just speak up a little bit, you're fading a little bit.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I'll speak louder anyway.
Oh, great. That'd be great. Yeah.
She's still with me. 50 years later, she's still with me. I feel her presence when I'm writing music. If I hurriedly write something and it looks sloppy or a stem doesn't connect to the note, you know, so many people write just on the computers now. They don't even write by hand, but I'm used to it. I've done it my whole life, and my scores are all done by hand. I write them all by hand, and really, I can write music as fast as I hear it. I just
wow.
You know, people write words on my music, but if something's sloppy, if something doesn't look quite right, I go back and I read. So I hear her say to me, "But my dear, if it's an important note to write, why not take the trouble to write it so it looks better?" You know.
Can I ask what, I wouldn't say what kept you, because maybe you have done a certain level of classical music writing, but when did the decision come not to be doing quartets and octets and symphonies and go instead into a more popular vein?
When I got married at age earned a living.
Okay.
A real simple reason. I was, as I said, played Latin music, and I loved that for years. I studied classical music. I loved the opera. I love jazz. I studied piano with Lenny Tristano, and I thought I might have had a career in jazz. But really, when I came back from my studies in France and got married, pretty soon after I had our first child, I realized I need to earn a living. It was a mystery, you know, like anyone else needed a job.
So how did you get that first gig? What was that first, I mean, after the Latin bands and stuff, when you were like, you needed something almost more stable and 9 to 5-ish, what did you do?
I grew up in the 50s. That was my generation growing up. And I really had no interest in the music that we know that we call 50s music. But when I got into popular music, I had a friend who said to me, you know, if you could learn how to do arranging like the song on the radio, you could get work. So I started listening to the radio. All the stations I previously hated, I started listening to. And I stopped listening to classical and stopped listening to jazz and Latin. And I just got into the period. But fortunately for me, there was a good time in music because it was the Beatles coming in. It was Burt Bacharach, who was so musical with the songs of Hal David, and Paul Simon, you know. So there were a lot of very good influences. And I just got started little by little doing rock and roll arrangements, doing commercials. I did many commercials as an arranger, some as a composer.
Well, what were some of the commercials that we might remember? Because I know about the TV theme songs, but not some of the commercials we might recall.
Well, for example, I did all the themes, all the arrangements for Robert Hall. I don't know if you know that. It was
the clothing store?
Clothing store, yeah. The values go up, right? The prices go down. Well, I arranged that song maybe 100 different ways to sound like every different hit, Tijuana Brass or whatever it was, you know, with different singers. And all those sleigh bells ringing, Christmas, whatever. It was a Christmas song. Anyway, I did all the game shows for Monopoly and Parker Brothers. You know, one gets started kind of slowly and inching along. And little by little, I got a chance to do documentary films.
Ooh.
And the first one I did was for the World's Fair for the Kodak Pavilion, 1964, I think it was. And
that was the New York one, yeah. 64, yeah.
And actually, that same year, I was working the World's Fair at the Caribbean Pavilion in a rumper shirt with Ray Barretto's band with the bandana around, and I playing Latin music all through the night. But that was my first film. It was a little film for the Kodak exhibit. And well,
when you say you were doing you were scoring them. You weren't making movies. You were doing.
Oh no, scoring them.
Scoring.
Of course.
Okay. Yeah.
I was composing. So I was getting my first chance to do it. I did a little film that never came out called Below the Hill. None of your listeners would know that, although it was an interesting little film. And then around about that time, I got Robert Russell Bennett, who was the great orchestrator for Richard Rogers, and also a student of Monty Bullinger many years before me, agreed to meet with me, and he asked me what I could do that he could help me with. and I really didn't have much anything to show him in the world of pop music. So, but I went home and I wrote like a theater dance suite in kind of the style of West Side Story. And I brought it back a week later, fully orchestrated, and he must have been impressed, I guess. And he said, "I'll try to help me." And a few weeks later, he called me and said he spoke to Skitch Henderson, who was a very noted musician and conductor, and soon to take over the Tonight Show.
Right.
And I started working for Skitch Henderson. And when the Tonight Show came on the air, he would ask me to write these little themes of station break material, not the main theme.
Right.
But sort of, the Johnny Carson show, right at the very beginning of Johnny Carson show. And Skitch would have me write these things as the show goes on and off the air. I wrote things for the big band, and that was my kind of my entree to theme writing. And after a while, I got a chance to do some of the Goodson Tubman game shows, like To Tell the Truth and Match Game and What's My Line.
Oh, a Match Game! Wow. Yeah. Okay.
So my early themes. And then the real kind of the biggest one I did at that time was around 1965. I did the theme for Wide World of Sports, which suddenly became a very hot show on Saturday afternoon. It was the first kind of afternoon show of sports anthology.
Yeah, and everybody waited for the skier. Everybody watched that opening because they wanted to see that skier tumble down the hill and live. But it was like horrible, horrible accident on the ski slope. So you were lucky because you had that connection there. People were literally going to tune in to watch the opening just to see that moment. So your theme got played over and over and over. People didn't skip it.
I didn't know that they didn't watch that.
Well, I did.
many years later, not many, but a number of years later, when I came to California, I became friendly with the fellow who wrote the copy for that. The Thrill of Victory, the Agony of Defeat, and we became good friends. So we worked from coast to coast and didn't know each other at that time. But of course, when I saw that, I simply accompanied it with a theme. My theme music accompanied the skier,
right,
and all the others. It's been so long, I don't remember. But that also led a couple of years later to Monday Night Football.
Wow, yeah.
Which I did the original Monday Night Football theme. That was on for a number of years. And, as I say, one thing leads to another. I did a film called Barbarella in the late 60s with Bob Crew, who was he was a creator for the producer of the Four Seasons records and the show that's now on Broadway called
Jersey Boys?
Jersey Boys.
Yeah. No, but Barbarella was Roger Vadim, wasn't it?
Roger Vadim, yes. Roger Vadim. And he, of course, was married to Jane Fonda.
Right.
And was the star of the film. And I had, at a very young age, not unpleasant task. After we finished the score and we wrote a number of songs, including Barbarella, it starts off with Jane Fonda in space, taking off her clothes.
Yeah.
And kind of floating around the air and then lying down for a long intergalactic voyage, as that we call space. And I had the not unpleasant task of going to France. Vadim, we called him his last name, Vadim and Jane, lived in a farmhouse out of Paris, about 40 miles out of Paris, and he sent the car for me. And I spent a couple of days with him, a weekend at their house or something. And in order to teach her this melody so she could hum along with it while she was doing this trip in space.
Yeah, that is a pleasant task.
The world of film.
It doesn't get back. A farmhouse in France with Jane Fonda and his then beautiful wife, Jane. Well, were they nice? Were they nice people?
Oh, Jane Fonda was a lovely, lovely woman. Yes, I think she's just a wonderful woman. And Vadim too, a very warm guy. Later on, years later, I did the 9 to 5, which is not only a picture that she was in, but it's her production company. But it was.
But you did not write the 9 to 5 song, but you scored the rest of it because 9 to 5 is a part. You didn't write.
I didn't write the song. No, Dolly Parton had already written that song.
Yeah,
she was in the movie. In those days, honestly, if I wasn't asked to write the song along with the film, I simply declined because I had both careers. I did songs and scores. Also, I liked the idea that when I would write a song, I'd score it to the film. It would become a real subject matter musically in the film.
Can I ask, do you do lyrics very much, or are you generally the music only and you only collaborate with other people for the lyrics?
You know what? You mentioned the word talent before. I recognized many years ago I have zero talent in lyric writing.
Okay.
I'm a good collaborator, and I've also had the great fortune to work with some of the great lyricists in the last half a century.
It's funny, one of the people you mentioned at the very top of the show that you respected and really thought are doing, Paul Simon. You mentioned Bacharach and David, which I assume is very present in your mind because you will soon be collaborating with Hal David, right?
Oh yeah, Hal and I have collaborated many years together on lots of songs. We have theater projects together, written songs for movies and television. And Hal's a good friend, and really one of the extraordinary lyric writers. I did a lot of work with Hal. I did a lot of work with Norman Gimbel. He played "Killing Me Softly." You mentioned "I Got a Name" and "Happy Days."
Norman Gimbel, yeah.
Norman Gimbel, yeah. And then also you mentioned "Love Boat." That was Paul Williams. Paul and I have done a lot of songs together.
Oh, cool. Yeah, Paul was a guest on this program. I guess this past year he was on our Tony show.
Oh, really?
Yeah, really, really cool guy.
I'm sure he had a good time. Paul has a great sense of humor, and he's a wonderful guy and a good friend.
So,
but I along the way worked with Sammy Kahn and
really? Can I ask? It seems as if. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
I just said Alan Marilyn Bergman, and that's the end of my list.
Oh yeah, no, but it seems I should have checked like the Broadway database, but it seems that for all the stuff you did in TV and then also in band music and songwriting, popular music, the theater thing didn't really. Did you try to do a Broadway show, or did you, were you ever involved in a Broadway-related thing?
I have been trying for years and years. I have a number of shows I wrote with Norman Gimbel. I have 2 shows I wrote with Hal David. One of them we're hoping to actually bring to fruition. Now I can't mention the name because we're not set with the rights yet, but I'm hoping we will. Something we've worked on. I've had a few shows produced. Nothing has ever come to Broadway. We did a show called, Norman Gimbel and I did a musical based on Midsummer Night's Dream that played here in Los Angeles with Cleavon Little playing the king and Mayor Winningham in their first role on the stage. We did a musical called The 11th that played in Florida for a number of months with Shelley Berman.
Shelley Berman, wow.
But really nothing so far that has come to Broadway, but I'd love to go back and play it today.
Yeah, I mean, I use Broadway as kind of a catchword. I mean, off-Broadway, too, or one of the major regional houses as well. I mean, Chicago's Goodman or something, Now, we're talking with Charles Fox on Dave's Gone By, and as we've been saying, he's collaborated with a bunch of wonderful people on songs we've all heard of, be they songs on the radio or songs that we've heard on TV. And the one thing I really, really have to thank you for, Mr. Fox, fantastic Mr. Fox, if I dare say, is, when I was a kid, my family and I, we watched Happy Days. It was the most popular show on television. It was a nostalgic show. It was fun. And in the first season, we would put on the show, and back then, there weren't that many channels, so you weren't flipping during, the credits and stuff. And they would show the credits and play Rock Around the Clock. It was Bill Haley and the Comets doing the entire song. We've gotten to the point nowadays where nobody watches credits anymore, or they flash the credits over the first 10 minutes of the program. But back then, the commercials were over, the show started, and then you were sitting there watching this phonograph record go round and round for all 2 minutes and 15 seconds of Bill Haley and the Comets. And it was agony. It was like, okay, it's a great song, but every week. And then you came in, bless your heart, and you changed the theme song. And yours is just over a minute long and much more fun. How did you get the Happy Days gig?
Well, I'll be happy to tell you, but I'll just say first of all, the themes, the television shows today don't have room to have those minute and a half long theme songs. They seem to be so afraid to lose their audience these days that at the end of one show they kind of roll the credits of the last show and song the next show and maybe 10 seconds of an identifying piece of music. I mean, it's that we no longer have the opportunity to do those themes that have, in some cases, become iconic, over the years as people watch television. With that show, Happy Days was actually a spin. It wasn't really a spin-off, but in Love American Style, we had 3 episodes every week, 3 complete stories. And one of the stories one week was called Love and the Happy Days. And it was really the pilot of Happy Days, although it was part of Love American Style. ABC loved Love American Style because they could kind of put a whole cost of a pilot within an episode of Love American Style. Well, they thought ultimately that the 50s was too soon to revisit, so they put it in the shelf, and that was it. A couple of years later, when George Lucas did American Graffiti, if you remember that,
Well, yes.
they used Rock Around the Clock. And that was a big hit. And so as a result of that bringing out an audience in the 50s, ABC said, well, let's try the 50s show that we had. And I did write the Happy Day song right away, right for the original show.
Oh.
But because the Rock Around the Clock being an American Graffiti, and they were trying to emulate the success of it, even though the pilot really came before American Graffiti. Most people wouldn't know that.
No, I don't remember that either, yeah.
Yeah, it came before American Graffiti.
So was it the second season that they decided to do your song instead of the Bill Haley number?
Exactly right. I'll tell you what happened. My song was used. My song, a Norman Gimbel song, was used at the end of the show. If you go back and see one of those early episodes, that you see "Rocking Around the Clock," the end title is my song. Well, in the second year, the show was doing pretty well, but not great. And but BBC decided to give it a stay with it, which they don't do anymore. If the show doesn't work, they pull it off the air. Those days, they stuck with the show. So we went into a second season. And they noticed that getting a lot of cards and letters about the Fonz, that he was kind of emerging as the most watched, most interesting person on the show. It was really Ronnie Howard's show to begin with, and of course he's still the main character, but the Fonz really took off,
Sure.
So as a result of that, they decided to revamp the show after the first few episodes in the second year. And instead of being a film show, with a canned laugh track, they decided to do this full-camera live show with videotape and invite an audience to watch. And if you were in the audience those days to watch the audience reacting when they bring out, Gary Marshall created the show, he used to come out and do a warm-up.
Yeah.
And great, he's funny and he's glib, and the audience loved it, started laughing. And then he would introduce the characters one by one, the Fonz and Anson Williams and Ron Howard, and people went crazy. You could just tell how iconic the show was just sitting in the audience. They just loved those people. So when they started to do that and to...
Mm-hmm. Oh, hello? Oh, did I lose you? Charles? We may have lost the connection there. Oh, darn. Well, let me play some more Charles Fox music while I try and get him back on the phone. We heard the Happy Days theme already, so why don't we hear a little Jim Croce. Jim Croce, doing a song co-written by our guest in the neighborhood, Charles Fox. Charles, was that with Norman Gimbel, that song?
Yes, it was another song. We wrote this for a movie called The Last American Hero. It was Jeff Bridges' first picture.
Right, The Last American Hero. And of course we heard I Got a Name. The name of the person we're talking to is Charles Fox, and the name of his autobiography is, surprise, surprise, Killing Me Softly, My Life in Music. The book even has a foreword by Roberta Flack, who made Killing Me Softly such a huge hit. How can people get a copy of your book?
Well, first of all, if they go to my website, I have killingmesoftly.com. They can see about the book and maybe read some excerpts and their photos. And there's a link to all the sites, Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble and all that. And
well, which one is the best one for you as far as royalties and making the best money off it? Directly from you?
I have no idea, but if anyone is happy to pursue it and go to my website, they can see what the interest them. But I do have a very nice website that a fellow did for me, and they can see what the book is about. And
KillingMeSoftly.com for the book called Killing Me Softly by Charles Fox.
The derivation of it was when I was in Paris, as I mentioned before, I wrote many letters home, about 200 letters to my family, and I wrote very descriptive letters about this extraordinary teacher and my life in Paris. Someone referred to it as Paris in black and white, before it became Technicolor. And we only found those letters in a shoebox. My mother had preserved them just a few years ago.
Wow.
And it was in the apartment house in the Bronx. My mother had already moved to California. This was a few years before she passed away. My wife and I decided that we would close up the apartment, and we were looking for things of personal significance to bring back to her, and photographs and whatever. And in this dresser drawer cupboard, probably not seen for many years, was a shoebox with all these letters, and those letters were the basis for this book in terms of revisiting my past.
Oh wow! And one thing people might not know, I assume this is in your book, and it's on Wiki, I believe, that Killing Me Softly was based on a friend of yours, or maybe a friend of the lyricist, who went to see Don McLean. Is that a true story?
You know, it's not exactly true.
Oh.
There's something. It's kind of a story that went sideways. We wrote the song for a young artist named Lori Lieberman.
Mm-hmm.
Norman and I were looking for the last song to finish her first album of 4 that we wrote and produced for Lori. She's a wonderful artist, a new artist. And we wrote Killing Me Softly in a day, really. Norman had in his little book that he carried with him, thoughts of ideas for lyrics and maybe a song title.
Mm-hmm.
And he had an idea for a song called Killing Me Softly with his blues. And we talked about that. I thought the blues sounded like an old-fashioned word, even in 1972. So he said, well, how about Killing Me Softly with a song? And we talked about what that could mean.
Yeah.
Song that moved you. We all get moved by songs, and sometimes songs become part of our lives. We carry songs with us forever.
Oh yeah.
I've heard from people who said they got married to my song, that they fell in love to my. Well, that's the nicest thing in the world to hear, that you really affected someone. So he gave me a lyric, went home and called me a few hours later the lyric, and with the telephone tucked up between my shoulder and my ear, I took the lyric down, and the melody just came right from the lyric. I mean, it sprang right out. And the next morning, Lori came over to the house, and I played it for her, and sang it to her, and she said she loved it. She said it reminded her of being at a Don McLean concert.
Oh.
After Don McLean was singing about her. Well, she used to tell that story in her nightclub act. And when she heard it, it reminded her of Don McLean. Somehow that got transformed, that we wrote it about Don McLean.
Yeah, or that it was based on her saying, "Oh my God, I went to this Don McLean concert, and he was just killing me softly with his song." So it's backwards. You should change the wiki page, or everybody can do that,
And actually, Don McLean, I think, believes that we did it because it's on his website that we wrote the song about him. And he and I were both inducted to the Songwriter Hall of Fame the same year, about 2004. And I only met him that one time, and we had a nice little chat and all that. But
well, it's a nice story.
Like an urban legend, or something.
No, we only have like 2-3 minutes left with Charles Fox, so I want to make them count. First of all, can you quickly finish the Happy Days story?
Oh, sure.
Because we're sort of cut off there. Yeah.
They came out with our song as the main title, and the whole show took off. It became a hit around the world. Our song became a hit around the world. It was a #1 record in countries like France, and I don't even know what other countries, but it was a hit record here in this country. And now the Smithsonian called to see if I had something to contribute to the new wing of American music, some singular piece. And I said, well, I have this record that the producers gave me that is in a frame that if you watch the beginning of Happy Days, when the record comes down onto the turntable, if you can slow your machines down, you see it says Happy Days, music by Charles Fox, lyrics by Norman Gimbel.
Uh-huh.
That record is one of a kind that they printed for that show. That record in April is going to be inducted to the Smithsonian Institute.
Oh, man. Along with Fonz's jacket and, like, Archie's chair.
It's going to be right next to the Fonz's jacket, yeah. It's going to be in the same space as the Fonz's jacket.
Well, I want to wish you mazel tov on that, but also, now, and forgive me if there's a bit of information that I'm missing, but
Sure.
Unless I'm mistaken, in, like, 2 years, you will be coming up on your 50th wedding anniversary? Forgive me if I'm missing some unfortunate information.
No, that's true. We're in the middle of our 40. Almost short of 2 years. We'll be married for 50 years. My wife, John, and I.
What's your secret, man? Oh dear, is it that filthy? No, really. But how do you?
I have a better story if I tell you Henry Mancini's secret.
Well, finish off with a cool story, because I know you have to go for an for a 10 o'clock thing your time. But give us a little nugget, a little something.
Henry Mancini used to say the reason for the long-term success of his marriage said his wife couldn't live on only half his money.
That is very good.
That's Henry Mancini anyway.
So, well, first of all, congratulations on that with the upcoming anniversary. I hope you do something really wonderful for it.
Thank you. You know what we're going to do? I'll tell you very quickly. We're going to
Sure.
recreate a trip that we did on our honeymoon. We got into a car and in France, and we drove all through Europe and spent about we took all our wedding present money at that time.
Yeah.
And, you know, those days you could do it with next to nothing, and I had been living in France, and so I knew how to get by with very little money. And we made our money stretch for about 2 or 3 months or something, and we had this wonderful. It was a wonderful way to start a marriage. I'll tell you that.
Oh,
and we may do that again.
And for you'll recreate it 50 years later. What a wonderful thing that is, and all these terrific things that you're continuing to do. I don't even have time to actually list them, but I do want to remind everybody to go to the website killingmesoftly.com to pick up a copy of Charles Fox's autobiography, Killing Me Softly, and just to thank you again for being such a delightful guest. Unfortunately, as it happens with guests on this program, I wish we had a whole other half hour to talk more and more about the things you've done. But it's really been a pleasure.
Again another time. I'd be happy to do another time with you, Dave. Anytime at all.
Thank you so much. Congratulations, and most of all, 50 years, man. That is true love American style.
I love it. Thank you very much.